is Elizabeth Harrell, and I will be leading your field trip today. This field trip is exploring the influence of trade and merchants on the medieval city of Siena, located in the Tuscany region of Italy. Roman legend holds that twin brothers, Romulus and Remus, founded the city of Rome. Further, legend also says that Siena and Asciano, sons of Remus, later founded the city of Siena. However, this tale lacks historical validation. Nonetheless, we are certain that in about 30 AD, the Romans established a military outpost called Siena that later developed into a trading post. This is where our tour begins. Currently, we are standing on Via Banchi di Sopra, the modern portion of Roman Via Francigena, an ancient route that connected Canterbury, England, to Rome. This was the main way that people in Italy were able to trade with northern Europe. For many decades, Via Cassia had been the main trade route from Rome to northern Europe. However, by the 600s, it was becoming increasingly hard to defend, as it was very close to the coast. Thus, it was decided to build a new route that went away from the coast. This route was called Via Francigena, and luckily for the Sienese, it ran directly through both Siena and Pisa. Later on in the 900s, this road became even more important when the Via Francigena became part of a pilgrimage route, after Archbishop Chageric of Canterbury, England, traveled from Canterbury to Rome and back on this route. This road brought much to Siena, including trade, wealth, and new connections. Certainly, it is one of the primary reasons that Siena flourished so much during medieval ages, the most defining aspect of the city. Now we are at the Duomo of Siena, built between 1215 and 1263. However, some say the site of the cathedral was once an Etruscan acropolis or temple to Minerva under a Roman camp. However, like the legend of Siena and Asciano, this is not proven. It is known that there was a Christian chapel here by the 800s at the latest. The cathedral you see today was built in the shape of a Latin cross and features both a hexagonal dome and a bell tower. Due to Siena's growth, Pope Alexander III of Siena put the Opera de Santa Maria, the Cathedral Masons Guild, in charge of constructing this new cathedral in 1196. At the time that it was consecrated, in 1215, it was the only building in Siena made entirely of marble. This demonstrated the immense wealth and power of the church. However, this wealth was something that came from the new trade that came to Siena through the Via Banchi di Sopra. The facade of the church represents a combination between three styles. It features Roman construction, Byzantine stripes in black and white to represent Siena's main colors, and Gothic pointed arches and gargoyles. This is the Palazzo Pubblico. The sun we see on the facade was added in 1425 by St. Bernardino. You might recognize this symbol because there was a similar sun that St. Bernardino added on the facade of the Duomo. Beneath the sun, we can see the Medici coat of arms, which was added in 1555 after Florence took full control of Siena. However, the palazzo itself, which is most relevant to our tour, was built beginning in 1297 to house the city's government. At this time, this included the Podesta, the Council of Nine, and elected executive officials. The Council of Nine ruled from 1285 to 1355, and is extremely important to Siena's history, and especially on our tour today. The Council of Nine was backed by the Novesci, a mercantile banking party composed of noble families that were either merchants or bankers. They were able to rise to power due to Siena's growth in trade and banking, which we can once again link back to the Via Banchi di Sopra. The Council of Nine was particularly favored because for many years Siena had gone through much turmoil, with a lot of fighting between the residents. Under the Council of Nine, the Sienese saw a brief period of peace, which at the time was very difficult to achieve. Inside the Palazzo Pubblico, we are now in the Hall of Nine, which is also called the Hall of Peace. This room was once the council hall of Siena's 9 executive magistrates on the Council of Nine. What is most notable about this room are the frescoes that cover the walls. These frescoes were painted by Ambrogio Lorenzetti from 1388 to 1339. On the back wall, we see the allegory of good government. This fresco was intended to guide the government to make good decisions, and to remind them of the consequences of their decisions. Justice is seated on a throne, looking up to wisdom. At the same time, Concordia is checking justice's scales. Further, a line of connected citizens goes from this group to an enthroned leader that is meant to represent Siena and also the good government. This is why he is dressed in black and white. This leader is flanked by peace, fortitude, justice, prudence, magnanimity, and temperance, the best human virtues. Above them, there are 3 angel-like virtues: faith, charity, and hope. On the right wall, we see the effects of good government. This is considered to be the largest cityscape done during medieval or Renaissance times. It shows Siena flourishing. There are many shops, celebrations of marriage, and guild workers working on their trades. In the country, we can see there's a good environment and a figure that represents security over the landscape. On the left wall, you are looking at the allegory and effects of bad government. Tyranny, instead of justice, sits at the throne flanked by greed, pride, vanity, cruelty, treason, fraud, fury, divisiveness, and war. Below him, we can see justice captured and bound. To the left, we see the city in a state of disarray. Buildings are crumbling, women are being kidnapped, farms are on fire, and people are dead in the street. Instead of an angel of security, the angel of terror is over the countryside, and we can see two armies marching towards each other. This fresco highlights what the government in medieval Siena was trying to avoid, whereas the good government shows what the medieval Sienese valued. It is important to note that the church was not at the center of these frescoes. Rather, it was the quality of republican government, the work of citizens, and a community that was built between the two. They were able to focus like this on a more independent style of government because of how much trade and banking had affected the city. They wanted to have an environment where people could work hard and work together to create the best Siena. Here we see the Torre del Mangia. The tower was built on top of the Palazzo Pubblico from 1325 to 1348 and is the dominant feature of Siena's skyline. When the tower was built, it was the tallest structure in all of Italy. Standing at 330 feet, it is still the third tallest medieval tower in Italy. The name comes from a legend that the first bell ringer was very lazy and ate a ton of food. At the time that the tower was built, plans to expand the city's cathedral were being drawn. In 1339, they began work on the expanded new cathedral that would have been 3 times the size of the Duomo we see today, and it would have been the largest Christian church in the world. The city leaders didn't want the new church to be taller than the government building, so they decided to build a tower at the Palazzo Pubblico that would represent the equality between the church and the state, and would be the same height as the church. However, the tower was completed before the plague hit Siena, whereas the church was not. At the top of the tower, the marble section is called the Cappella di Piazza, and it was added as a tribute to the Virgin Mary by those who survived the Black Death. Today, the tower is still taller. This emphasis on equality between the church and the state was important to note about Siena, and is certainly linked back to its emphasis on mercantilism and the symbolism that we saw throughout the frescoes in the Sala de Passa. This area, called the Piazza del Campo, is Siena's central square. This square was paved in 1349, but was meant to commemorate the entire period of 1292 to 1355, when the Council of Nine ruled the city. The piazza is shaped like a concave clamshell and served as a neutral area between Siena's 3 hills and competing neighborhoods. There are 9 long lines, each of which represent one of the 9 merchants and the bankers on the Council of Nine. The fact that they all meet at one central point, in front of the Palazzo Pubblico, symbolizes the unity of the government and thus the unity of the city. In many ways, this symbolism is reminiscent of the symbolism seen in the frescoes within the Palazzo Pubblico. Further, it shows the influence that the merchants and bankers had over the city. The shape of the 9 lines also forms a shape that is reminiscent of the folds in Mary's cloak. While it is not directly religious, this is also meant to show that the Virgin Mary was a protector of the city, as we can see in those who survived the Black Death thanking her with the monument. It is also good to notice that all of the buildings around the Piazza del Campo are the same height. This is because a new building regulation in 1297 said that all buildings had to be the same height, another way to show unity within the city. Now we are standing at the Loggia della Mercanzia. Looking back into history a bit, Siena gained the right to free trade in 1125. Afterwards, local merchants banded together to form a guild, the Tribunal of Merchants. Under the Council of Nine, Siena was a merchant banking oligarchy, so the tribunal gained much power, as they had been through the past few years as trade and banking grew more and more at the Via Banchi di Sopra. They were also able to build their new headquarters on the highest part of the Piazza del Campo, directly across from Palazzo Pubblico and where the northern trade routes entered the central square. This showed just how important the tribunal was to the city and just how much the government valued their merchants and traders. In 1417, the rear entrance was expanded into this loggia. As you can see, it looks a little bit more ornate and more like Renaissance-style architecture, not what we've seen throughout the city. This shows that as the city was developing, they were becoming more aware of things going on around Italy, and it's a little bit more of a shift away from medieval times towards the Renaissance. This palazzo, Palazzo Salimbellini, is that of a papal and imperial tax collecting company that operated on the Via Banchi di Sopra and benefited immensely from Siena's growing power as a banking and trading city. You can see how much they benefited by just how nice their palazzo is. However, during the 1400s, the family was disgraced, and they are forced to move their practice to the family palace. Today, this building is still home to Monte dei Paschi Bank, which is considered to be Europe's oldest functioning bank. This is a symbol of just how much those medieval times influence the city today, as there's still an operating bank in this very building. All of the places we have seen today highlight just how influential trade routes are for developing a city. Had the Via Francigena not been designed to run through Siena, we would have a completely different city. Due to this route, Siena became a relevant banking and trade city, as we have seen on this field trip. This route also developed the way that the Sienese felt about their government, the values that were reflected in the frescoes of Palazzo Pubblico. Siena was a very powerful city in Italy, and had it not been for the Black Death, they probably would have continued to grow throughout the Renaissance and remain one of Italy's most important cities. The Black Death, however, stopped Siena's growth. This is why the medieval portion of the city is still so visible today. From all that we have seen, we can certainly say that Siena was a city that truly valued the importance of the individual. Each person in the city contributed to the overall whole. Further, having a community depended on having a good government with values that were honest, true, and allowed for economic growth. While the focus was mainly secular, religion still played a role in protecting the Sienese and guiding their values. I hope that you enjoyed this field trip today.